It was supposed to be a joyous Christmas dinner at my daughter's home, but a sudden, terrifying illness sent me stumbling into the kitchen in a state of shock. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. There, shaking, I went to get a glass of water and my eyes landed on a strange, small jar containing a liquid substance. When I managed to read the tiny print on the label, my body went rigid with fear. My fingers, trembling uncontrollably, dialed 911. In that single moment, the chasm between a festive family celebration and a horrifying truth opened up, and it changed my entire world. The monotonous voice of a news anchor was droning on about inflation rates, when the shrill, piercing ring of the telephone sliced through the tranquility of my living room. I fumbled around on the end table for my reading glasses, my heart skipping a beat as I squinted to make out the caller ID. It was Claire, my daughter. She never called this late on a weeknight. "Mom." Her voice cracked, sounding like a nervous teenager's, though she was a 42-year-old woman. "I need your help. It's urgent." The raw desperation laced in those 3 words made me sit up straighter in my worn, comfortable leather armchair. Beside me, a cup of coffee had gone cold hours ago, completely forgotten, the way everything else is when a mother's worry takes hold. "What's happened, sweetheart?" A heavy silence stretched between our 2 homes, filled only by the sound of her ragged, anxious breathing. Through the phone's receiver, I could hear the distinct sound of footsteps. They were fast, frantic, pacing back and forth across what I pictured was her polished kitchen floor, a mere 40 minutes away, in the suburbs of Cleveland. "I lost money, Mom. A lot of money." Her voice dropped to a choked whisper. 50,000. My hand instinctively tightened around the receiver. $50,000. That was more than my entire annual pension. "How did you—" "Cryptocurrency?" The word tumbled out of her, drenched in bitterness and self-loathing. "I thought I was being smart, diversifying our savings." She took a shaky breath. "David doesn't even know the full extent of it yet." From my living room, the mantel clock ticked with a steady, indifferent rhythm, marking seconds that felt like agonizing hours. On the television screen, a cheerful weather reporter promised a blanket of snow by Christmas. It was a bizarre contrast, normal life, moving forward while my daughter's world was actively crumbling. "Claire, just slow down. Tell me exactly what happened." More pacing echoed through the line. I heard the scrape of a chair against a tile floor. There was this investment opportunity. Digital assets, they called it. The projected returns looked absolutely incredible, something like 30% in just 6 months. Her voice broke. "I used our emergency fund, our kids' college money. I even borrowed against the house." My own chest tightened in a knot of fear. "You mortgaged the house?" "Not the whole thing," she said quickly. "Just a home equity loan. For 25,000. Her voice completely shattered now, turning into a sob. "Mom, they're demanding payment. The creditors. They said if I don't come up with the money by January 15th, they're going to start seizure proceedings." I pushed myself up out of my chair, my old knees groaning in protest. The familiar living room suddenly felt suffocatingly small, as if the walls were pressing inward on me. Through the large bay window, Mr. Henderson's festive Christmas lights twinkled cheerfully across the street, a stark and painful reminder that other normal families were preparing for the holidays, not staring down the barrel of financial ruin. "Have you spoken to a lawyer? Perhaps there are options." "I can't afford a lawyer." Claire's voice rose, raw panic finally eclipsing her embarrassment. "I can barely afford our groceries. Do you understand what I'm telling you? They could take our house. David and the kids would have nowhere to go." The image struck me with the force of a physical blow. My kind son-in-law's gentle face, my little granddaughter Maya asking why they had to move, and 8-year-old Leo wondering if it was somehow his fault. Children should never be forced to carry the weight of their parents' mistakes. "There has to be something we can do," I said, speaking more to myself than to Claire. "I have some savings. Maybe—" "Mom, you don't understand." Her voice turned sharp, cutting me off. "This isn't a few $100s. This is serious, adult money. Life-changing money." The tone of her words stung deeply, When had my daughter started speaking to me as if I were a clueless child, as if my modest pension and the careful savings my late husband Robert and I had built were somehow trivial and inadequate? I'm just trying to help, Claire. I know you are, she exhaled, a shaky, frustrated sound. But I need real help. Substantial help. The kind of help that actually makes a difference. Static crackled through the phone line. Outside, I heard the slam of a car door. Just a normal sound, on a normal evening, in a normal neighborhood. A neighborhood where daughters didn't call their mothers begging for a rescue from their own foolish decisions. But Claire was still my daughter. And despite everything, the poor choices, the entitlement that sometimes seeped into her voice, she was still the little girl who used to help me plant roses in this very yard, who cried for a week when her pet hamster died, who used to call me her hero. Tell me what you need, I said softly into the receiver. The silence that followed stretched on for too long, long enough for a dreadful realization to dawn on me. Claire had been carefully building towards something specific. This entire conversation, the calculated revelation of each disastrous detail, the pointed emphasis on the children's welfare, it had all been leading to a particular destination. Mom, Claire's voice changed again, becoming softer, almost gentle, but underneath that feigned gentleness, I detected something else, something that made my stomach clench with a sudden, sickening unease. I'm here. There is one way you could help, one real solution that would fix everything. The way she emphasized the words, real solution, made my blood run cold. I remained standing by my armchair, the phone pressed so hard against my ear that it ached. Whatever Claire was about to suggest, I already knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I wouldn't like it. What kind of solution? Well, she cleared her throat, and I could vividly picture her running a hand through her hair, a nervous habit she'd had since she was a little girl planning something questionable. You know how you're always complaining about how much work it is to maintain that big house? The heating bills, the roof repairs, all the yard work? My grip on the phone receiver tightened until my knuckles were white. Claire, what are you getting at? The house has to be worth at least 300 by now, she continued. Probably even more with the way property values have been climbing. And you're there all by yourself, Mom. It's just too much for someone your age. Someone my age? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. I'm 68, not 98. But think about it practically. Her voice took on that patient, condescending tone, the one she used when explaining things to a child, the one that always made me want to hang up the phone. You rattle around in 4 bedrooms all by yourself. The maintenance costs are just eating up your pension. And honestly, wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller? Somewhere with less responsibility? I sank back down into my armchair, the full weight of her suggestion flooding through me like ice water. You want me to sell my house? It would solve both our problems, Claire said quickly, as if the speed of her words would somehow make the suggestion less outrageous. You could buy a lovely little condo, maybe in one of those senior communities with all the activities and meal plans. You'd have neighbors your own age. No more worrying about broken gutters or shoveling snow. And the leftover money, I finished for her, my voice flat, would pay for your gambling debts. It wasn't gambling, Mom. It was an investment. I shot to my feet again, a hot rage building in my chest, like steam in a whistling kettle. This is my home, Claire. This is where your father and I lived for 37 years. This is where we raised you. This is where he died. Dad's been gone for 3 years. Her voice turned cold, mechanical, devoid of all emotion. He's not coming back just because you keep his bedroom exactly the same as the day he passed. The cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered, one hand reaching out for the wall to steady myself. How dare you? I'm being practical. You're being sentimental about a building. A building? My voice rose until it echoed off the very walls of this building. These walls that held every single important memory of my adult life. This is where your father planted his rose garden, where we had Christmas morning with you every single year until you moved out, where he taught you how to ride a bicycle right in the driveway. And now it's just an expensive burden? Claire's patience was clearly wearing thin, her desperation bleeding through the practiced manipulation. Mom, be honest with yourself. When was the last time you even went upstairs? When was the last time you entertained anyone in that formal dining room? I thought of Robert's workshop in the basement, still untouched since the day he died. The way the morning light still fell across his favorite reading chair by the bedroom window. The kitchen where he had made my coffee every single morning for nearly 4 decades. You don't understand, I said quietly, the fight draining out of me. No, I understand that you're being selfish. The word struck me like a slap across the face. My family is about to lose everything, and you're worried about keeping a shrine to the past. A past that's gone, Mom. Dad is gone. Don't you dare tell me about your father. I warned. He would want you to help us. He would want you to help his grandchildren. But you're so wrapped up in your precious memories that you can't see past your own feelings. My chest burned, and the room began to spin slightly. Claire's voice continued, relentless and unforgiving. Think about Maya and Leo. Think about David. Do they matter less to you than your empty rooms and your old photo albums? That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is watching my children become homeless while my own mother sits in a house worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, too stubborn to make the smart choice. The smart choice. As if selling the home where I had built my entire life was just another financial transaction. As if Robert's memory could be neatly packed up in boxes and moved to some sterile apartment complex designed for people who were just waiting to die. The answer is no. Silence. Then, what? No, Claire. I will not sell my house to pay for your mistakes. My mistakes? Her voice turned vicious. You mean my attempt to provide a better life for my family? To give your grandchildren the opportunities that you never gave me? I gave you everything I could. Everything except the one thing I actually need from you right now. God, you're exactly like Dad always said. You were so generous with your advice, but so stingy with your wallet. The lie was so audacious, so breathtakingly cruel, that I couldn't speak for a moment. Robert had never, ever said anything of the sort. He had been so proud of how hard we'd both worked, how we had saved every single penny to give Claire advantages in life that we had never had. Your father never. Enjoy your empty house, Mom. Enjoy your precious memories. I hope they keep you warm when you're dying all alone in that place. The line went dead. I stood there frozen, holding the phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry wasp. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. Slowly, carefully, I placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that filled the room afterward felt entirely different from the comfortable, peaceful quiet of my usual evenings. This silence was hollow, brittle, the kind of silence that follows a violent explosion. I sank back into my chair, but my body wouldn't relax. Every muscle remained tensed, bracing for another blow. Claire's words echoed in the empty room. Dying alone in that place, as if this house, this cherished home, was somehow a prison instead of the sanctuary that Robert and I had lovingly created together. I looked around my living room with new, wounded eyes, trying to see it the way Claire saw it. The furniture was old, yes, but it was well maintained. The carpet showed the wear patterns from 30 years of daily life. Family photos covered the mantel. Claire's graduation, her wedding, the kids' school pictures. Was this really just a museum dedicated to the past? My feet carried me into the kitchen without any conscious thought, guided perhaps by muscle memory, or maybe by a deep-seated need to be somewhere Robert's presence still felt strongest. The solid oak table where we had eaten breakfast together every morning for decades. The window over the sink where he'd stood washing dishes, humming off-key show tunes. The phone rang again and my heart lurched into my throat. Was it Claire, calling back to apologize? But the caller ID displayed Eleanor Vance's number. Margaret, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Eleanor lived 3 houses down. She had been my closest friend since before Robert got sick. We'd both been widowed within months of each other. If anyone would understand, it would be Eleanor. Claire called, I said, and somehow, those 2 words contained the entire crushing weight of the conversation. Ah, let me guess. She needs money. How did you? Margaret, I've known that girl since she was 7 years old, trying to climb the apple tree in my backyard. She's always been impulsive. What has she gotten herself into this time? I told Eleanor everything: the cryptocurrency disaster, the threatened foreclosure, the demand that I sell my house. When I got to Claire's final, cruel words about me dying alone, Eleanor made a sharp, disgusted noise. That little manipulator, using your own grandkids as emotional leverage, then turning on you and attacking you when it doesn't work. But what if she's right? The question had been gnawing at me since I'd hung up. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe... Stop right there. Eleanor's voice turned sharp. You raised that girl. You put her through college. You helped her with the down payment when she and David bought that house. You do not owe her your home just because she made stupid, reckless choices with her money. But the children have parents who should have thought about them before they gambled away their college funds on some get-rich-quick scheme. This is not your fault, Margaret. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. Through the window, I could see Eleanor's porch light glowing, a small beacon in the darkness. It was a strange and bitter irony that a neighbor could provide more comfort than my own daughter. She said Robert would want me to help them. Robert would want you to help if you could, but he would also want you to keep your dignity in your home. He would be absolutely furious at Claire for even asking this of you. The undeniable truth of that statement hit me deep in my soul. Robert had loved Claire fiercely, but he had never tolerated manipulation or emotional blackmail. He would have seen right through her tactics in an instant. What should I do, Eleanor? Nothing. At least not tonight. Don't you dare make any decisions while you're this angry and hurt. Claire will probably call back tomorrow, either to apologize or to try a different manipulative approach. Give yourself time to think clearly. After we hung up, I sat in the silent kitchen for a long, long time. The refrigerator hummed its familiar tune. The furnace kicked on with a low rumble. These were the normal house sounds that had been my constant companions for 40 years. I thought about Claire's suggestion, a senior community with activities and meal plans. The very idea made my skin crawl. Organized fun with complete strangers. Eating cafeteria food. Living in a sterile box designed for convenience rather than the comfort of a life well lived. Then my thoughts turned to Christmas morning, just 3 weeks away. For the past 3 years, since Robert died, Claire's family had always come here. Maya and Leo opening their presents under the big tree in the living room. David helping me prepare dinner in this very kitchen. Claire pretending to enjoy my coffee while secretly wishing it was from some fancy cafe. Would this be the last Christmas in our home? Would Claire's anger poison even that cherished tradition? I pulled out the photo albums that Robert had so meticulously maintained, flipping through the crinkling pages of our shared memories. Our wedding day, both of us so young and impossibly serious. Claire's first steps, taken right here on this kitchen floor. Countless birthday parties in the backyard. Robert in his garden, proudly holding up tomatoes that grew bigger than baseballs. Every single room in this house held pieces of our life together. They weren't shrines to the past, as Claire had so cruelly claimed. They were the very foundations of who I was. How could I ever explain to her that selling this house would be like selling off my own history? Eleanor was right about one thing. I shouldn't make any decisions tonight. But as I closed the heavy photo albums and turned off the kitchen light, I knew that something fundamental had shifted between Claire and me, something that might never fully heal. The little girl who used to help me plant roses had become a woman willing to obliterate her mother's peace of mind for money. And I wasn't sure if forgiveness would come easily for either of us. Sleep had been elusive. I'd spent the long night replaying Claire's cruel words, Eleanor's wise counsel, and my own swirling hurt feelings. By 10:00 the next morning, I was sitting in my familiar armchair with my third cup of coffee, staring at the silent telephone, as if it might magically provide answers. The bank statements I had pulled from my desk drawer lay scattered across the coffee table. $15,000 in savings. My monthly pension of $2,800. It wasn't much by Claire's new standards, but it was honest money, earned through 40 years of my husband's engineering work and my own careful budgeting. Maybe I'd been too hasty. Maybe there was still room for some kind of compromise. I picked up the receiver, my hand trembling slightly, and dialed Claire's number before I could lose my courage. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Mom," She sounded distracted, busy. Maybe she was in the middle of making breakfast. Claire? I cleared my throat, choosing my words with deliberate care. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. There was a pause. I could hear background noise, David asking about something, Claire shushing him impatiently. Look, I can't give you 50, 0, I continued, my voice steady. But I checked my savings. I have 15, 0 available. It's not much, I know, but it's something. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. 15,000? Claire's voice carried that same dismissive, condescending tone from the day before. Mom, that's not even close to what I need. I know it's not the full amount, I pressed on, but it would help with the immediate pressure. Maybe it could buy you some time to work out a payment plan with the creditors. Payment plan? Claire laughed, but there was absolutely no humor in the sound. It was sharp and brittle. These aren't credit card companies, Mom. These are serious people who want their money now. I gripped my coffee mug tighter, the ceramic warm against my cold hands. Well, what if I co-signed a loan? My credit is still good. Or maybe we could look into a partial refinance of my house. Stop. Claire's voice turned sharp as a knife. Just stop with the small-time thinking. I don't need a few thousand here and a few thousand there. I need real money. Substantial money. $15,000 is substantial to me. And that's exactly the problem, she shot back. Your idea of substantial and the reality of the situation are two completely different things. My chest tightened again. Claire, I am trying to help you. No, you're trying to feel better about yourself while offering me pocket change. Do you have any idea what 50-0 looks like? Your 15-0 is pathetic. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. Pathetic. My life savings, carefully and painstakingly accumulated through decades of modest, responsible living, was dismissed as pathetic by my own daughter. Maybe if you hadn't gambled away your family's security. Don't you dare lecture me about responsibility from your ivory tower. You've been living off Dad's pension and his life insurance for 3 years, rattling around in a house that's worth more than most people see in an entire lifetime. Your father's life insurance barely covered his final medical bills, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The point is, you have options. Real options. You're just too selfish to use them. There was that word again. Selfish. As if my desire to keep the home where I had built my entire adult life was somehow a moral failing. I offered you what I could afford, I said quietly. What you could afford without inconveniencing yourself, she sneered. What about what I can afford? What about what your grandchildren can afford when we're living in our car? You are not going to be living in your car. How do you know that? How do you know anything about what we're facing? You just sit there in your comfortable house, with your comfortable pension, making your comfortable judgments about other people's desperation. I stood up and paced to the kitchen window. Outside, the winter morning light made everything look stark, cold, and unforgiving. Claire, please, let's just talk about this calmly. I am calm, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I'm explaining simple math to someone who apparently doesn't understand numbers. $15,000 doesn't solve $50,000 of debt. A co-signed loan doesn't help someone whose credit is already destroyed. Your little solutions are meaningless. They're not meaningless to me. That's because you don't understand the scale of real-world problems. You live in this little bubble where 15-0 feels significant because you've never had to face any serious financial pressure. The breathtaking unfairness of her accusation stole my breath. I had worked 2 jobs while Robert was in engineering school. We had lived on soup and sandwiches for months after Claire was born, saving every single penny we had for her future. We drove the same old car for 12 years and wore the same winter coats until they were threadbare. I've faced plenty of financial pressure, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. Your father and I. That was 50 years ago. Things are different now. Money is different now. If you don't have real money to offer, then don't waste my time pretending to help. Real money. Everything else was apparently just play money, monopoly money, not worthy of a serious person's consideration. So, unless I sell my house, I'm just wasting your time. Finally, she said, her voice flat and cold. You understand. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone until the dial tone became an unbearable shriek. Then I let my hand fall to my side. The receiver clattered loudly against the linoleum floor. My coffee had gone cold. My hands were shaking again, and somewhere deep inside my chest, I felt something shatter, something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. The next 4 days passed in a surreal haze of disbelief, and a slowly growing, horrifying clarity. I found myself wandering aimlessly through the house, touching Robert's belongings, his reading glasses still resting on the bedroom nightstand, his favorite coffee mug still in the kitchen cabinet, the beautiful quilt he'd inherited from his grandmother hanging over the back of the living room sofa. Each morning, I would walk through his garden, where the rose bushes stood dormant, their bare, thorny branches reaching toward the gray December sky like gnarled, arthritic fingers. This was where he had spent his happiest hours, coaxing and nurturing life from the dark soil. Now, everything lay sleeping, waiting for spring. But some things, I was beginning to learn, never wake up again. By the third day, Eleanor knocked on my kitchen door. You look terrible, she said bluntly, settling into the chair across from mine, with her own mug of coffee she'd brought from home. I feel worse. Claire again? I recounted the entire second phone call, including Claire's dismissal of my life savings as pathetic pocket change. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression growing stormier with each detail, occasionally shaking her head in disgust. My sister-in-law was like that, Eleanor said when I had finished. Always saw her family as a private source of funding for her endless schemes. It started with small requests, 100 here, 200 there. Then it escalated to thousands. Finally, she wanted us to mortgage our house for some ridiculous restaurant idea she had. What did you do? We said no. She didn't speak to us for 2 years. Eleanor sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Best 2 years of our marriage, if I'm being perfectly honest. I stared out the kitchen window at the frost-covered bird bath that Robert had loved so much. But Claire's my daughter. Claire is a 42-year-old woman who made 42-year-old choices, Eleanor countered firmly. You didn't force her to gamble away her family's money. It wasn't gambling, it was investing. I echoed my daughter's words weakly. Eleanor just raised an eyebrow. Potato, potato. The point is, her poor decisions do not create an obligation for you. That afternoon, I sat in my study, surrounded by a lifetime of legal documents. My will, insurance papers, the deed to the house. Robert and I had been so careful with our finances, so deliberate about building a foundation of security for our old age. We had planned for medical emergencies, for home repairs, even for long-term care if one of us ever needed it. We had never, in our wildest nightmares, planned for our own child to treat us like a bank to be robbed. I opened our will and read the section about Claire's inheritance. Everything would go to her, eventually. The house, the remaining savings, my jewelry that had been passed down from my own mother. But, eventually, clearly wasn't soon enough for Claire. She wanted her inheritance now, while I was still alive and breathing. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Claire wasn't thinking of me as her mother anymore. She was thinking of me as an obstacle standing between her and a sum of money. That evening, Eleanor called to check on me. I keep thinking about something you said. I told her, about family being seen as a source of funding. Is that all I am to Claire now? What do you think? Eleanor asked gently. I thought about Claire's tone when she had called my savings pathetic. The casual cruelty she'd shown when she dismissed 40 years of careful planning as meaningless. The way she had hung up the phone the very moment she realized I wouldn't agree to sell my house. I think my daughter is gone, I said quietly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And I don't know who this person is who has taken her place. Sometimes people show you who they really are when they're desperate, Eleanor said softly. And sometimes, desperation just reveals what was always there, hidden under the surface. You think Claire was always this selfish? I think Claire was always spoiled, Eleanor stated, not unkindly. You and Robert gave her everything she ever wanted. college paid for, help with her house down payment, extravagant Christmas gifts for the kids every single year. She's never had to face any real consequences for her poor choices. The truth of it stung, because it was true. We had made things easy for Claire, maybe far too easy. What would Robert say about all this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Robert would be heartbroken, she finally said. But he would also be furious at Claire for treating you this way, and he would want you to protect yourself. After we hung up, I walked through the house one more time. Every room held memories of the family Claire claimed I was being selfish to preserve her first steps in the hallway. Countless birthday parties in the dining room, magical Christmas mornings around the tree in the living room. But those were memories of a different Claire. A little girl who had helped me rake leaves, who had cried when her pet hamster died, who had hugged me so tight when I taught her to ride her bike. They've been asking about Grandpa's cooking all week. The genuine warmth in her voice melted the last of my resistance. This was my daughter, the little girl who had helped me in the garden, who had cried at her father's funeral, who had once told me I was her hero. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, I said, a real smile in my voice. We all are. 4 o'clock sharp. And Mom, thank you for giving us another chance. After hanging up, I went upstairs and laid out my clothes for Christmas Eve. The red sweater Robert had given me for my last Christmas, a pair of pressed slacks, the pearl necklace Claire had given me for Mother's Day 2 years ago. Everything had to be perfect. Standing in my bedroom, I caught my reflection in Robert's vanity mirror. An old woman, preparing to spend Christmas with her family, hope and nervousness warring in her expression. Eleanor's warnings echoed faintly in my memory, but I pushed them aside. Some risks, I told myself, were worth taking, especially when innocent children were involved. Tomorrow, I would find out whether my daughter had truly changed, or whether Eleanor's suspicions were justified all along. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold, but my spirits remained bright as I carefully loaded the wrapped gifts into my car. The 40-minute drive to Claire's townhouse passed quickly, filled with my mental rehearsals of conversations with my grandchildren, and careful navigation through the unfamiliar suburban streets. Claire's neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine, with matching mailboxes, perfectly manicured lawns, and festive Christmas lights twinkling from every roofline. Her townhouse sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, decorated with beautiful wreaths and garland that David had probably spent days arranging. I gathered the gifts from my back seat, taking a deep, fortifying breath of the cold winter air before walking up the path to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could see movement inside, and I could hear the high, excited voices of children. Claire opened the door before I even had a chance to knock, her face breaking into a smile that looked like genuine joy. Mom. Perfect timing. She pulled me into a firm, warm hug that felt real, not performed for an audience. The kids have been watching for your car for the last hour. Before I could respond, Maya appeared at Claire's side, her dark hair flying as she threw herself at my legs. Grandma, we missed you so much. Leo materialized just seconds later, slightly more reserved than his sister, but grinning widely. Did you bring the magic tricks? Dad said you might remember some. The warmth that flooded my chest was pure and uncomplicated. These children loved me without an agenda, without any calculations about money or property. Their affection was the most honest and beautiful thing I had experienced in months. Let's see what Santa brought for you too, I said, hefting the gift bags. The living room blazed with Christmas cheer. A towering 7-foot tree stood heavy with ornaments. Stockings hung from the mantel, and soft jazz music played from hidden speakers. David emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron dusted with flour, his smile warm but somehow strained around the edges. Margaret, it's so wonderful to see you. His hug felt tentative, and he seemed to avoid holding my gaze for too long. Dinner's almost ready. Prime rib, just like you love. It smells incredible, I said, handing him Robert's apple pie. I thought this might go well with dinner. His eyes brightened with what looked like genuine pleasure. The children will be thrilled. They've been asking about Grandpa Robert's recipes all week. The gift opening was a joyful chaos. Leo squealed with delight over the chemistry set, immediately opening the boxes to examine the tiny test tubes and colorful tablets. Maya studied the model airplane kit with a serious concentration, tracing the wing designs with one small finger. "Can we build it together, Grandma?" "Absolutely. The next time you visit, we'll make it fly." Claire watched these interactions with apparent satisfaction, playing the role of the proud mother perfectly. She helped Maya organize the airplane pieces, praised Leo's scientific enthusiasm, and took pictures of every single moment with her phone. "Family photo time," she announced, positioning everyone around the Christmas tree. "This might just be our best Christmas yet." Standing there with my arm around Claire's shoulders, with Maya and Leo pressed tightly against my sides, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Robert had died. A sense of complete belonging. Whatever doubts Eleanor had planted in my mind seemed foolish and cynical now. This was my family, flawed but real, and we were together. Dinner preparations moved everyone toward the dining room, where David had created a magazine-worthy table setting. White linens, gold-rimmed china, and tall candles that reflected off crystal glasses filled with a deep red wine. The prime rib sat at the head of the table like a magnificent centerpiece, surrounded by platters of roasted vegetables and golden Yorkshire pudding. "This is just beautiful, David," I said, settling into my assigned seat. He bustled around the table, making final minute adjustments to the place settings with a kind of nervous energy. "Just want everything to be perfect for Christmas." Claire took her position at the head of the table, raising her wine glass with a ceremonial gravity. "Before we eat, I'd like to make a toast." Her voice carried a manufactured weight of significance. "To family, to forgiveness, to second chances, and to the people who matter most." Everyone at the table raised their glasses. Even the children had small portions of wine, heavily mixed with juice. The crystal caught the candlelight, creating tiny, fleeting rainbows across the white tablecloth. "To family," we echoed in unison. The wine was excellent, rich and smooth with hints of cherry. I savored both the taste and the moment, feeling profoundly grateful for Claire's apparent maturity in reaching out, for David's warm hospitality, and for my grandchildren's pure, unconditional love. Around the table, the conversation flowed easily. Maya described her school's Christmas pageant in great detail. Leo explained his latest science fair project. Claire shared funny stories from her office. It was all just normal family interaction, the kind of scene Robert and I had always dreamed of when Claire was a small child. But as I reached for my water glass, something felt slightly off. A faint, fleeting dizziness, the kind you get from standing up too quickly after sitting for too long. I blinked, attributing it to the wine and the sheer excitement of the evening. The conversation continued to flow around the table as I savored the precious moment of family unity. Claire carved the prime rib with practiced skill, while David served the vegetables, the children chattering excitedly about their Christmas morning plans. Everything felt perfectly normal, perfectly right. "Grandma, do you want to see my clay mug after dinner?" Leo asked, bouncing slightly in his chair. "Absolutely. I hear it's a masterpiece." The wine had been stronger than I'd expected, leaving me feeling pleasantly warm and relaxed. Or maybe it was just the profound joy of being included again, of sitting at a family table where I felt wanted rather than merely tolerated. I reached for my water glass and noticed my hand seemed slightly unsteady. It must be the excitement, I thought. My heart had been racing ever since I'd arrived, overwhelmed by the children's unbridled enthusiasm and Claire's apparent transformation. "Mom, you look a little flushed," Claire observed with what sounded like genuine concern. "Is everything okay?" "I'm just warm. David's cooking always makes me feel at home." But as I spoke the words, something twisted uncomfortably deep in my stomach. A sharp, sudden cramp that made me shift in my chair. The sensation passed as quickly as it came, and I dismissed it as overindulgence. The rich food, the wine, the emotional intensity of our reconciliation. Maya was telling a long, rambling story about her teacher's pet rabbit when the room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, blinking hard to clear my vision. The candle flames appeared to blur and stretch into long golden streaks. Are you sure you're all right, Margaret? David's voice carried a note of anxiety that seemed disproportionate to my minor discomfort. I just need some water. I tried to smile reassuringly, but my mouth felt strangely dry, despite the wine I'd had. Claire half rose from her chair. The kitchen's right through there, if you want to get some fresh water. Take your time. The cramping in my stomach intensified, now accompanied by waves of nausea that made it difficult to swallow. I pressed my hand to my forehead, feeling a clammy sweat break out despite the room's comfortable temperature. Maybe I should. I started to stand, then sat back down abruptly as a powerful wave of dizziness swept over me. The dining room spun lazily, the faces around the table becoming soft and unfocused. Grandma? Maya's voice sounded very far away, though she was sitting directly across from me. You don't look good. Should we call someone? David asked quietly, his hands twisting his napkin into tight spirals. Claire's voice remained unnaturally calm, almost soothingly helpful. Mom, why don't you step into the kitchen? Maybe splash some cold water on your face. All the excitement of tonight might just be a little overwhelming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The nausea was building steadily now, my stomach clenching with increasing frequency. Standing up required a conscious, deliberate effort. My legs felt heavy and disconnected from my body, responding sluggishly to my mental commands. Sorry, I managed to say. That sweet little girl had grown into a woman who called her mother's life savings pathetic. Standing there in Robert's quiet, empty workshop, I made a decision. I would not sell my house to fund Claire's poor choices, but I also wouldn't let her destroy what little remained of our relationship with her relentless demands and cruel manipulation. The next time Claire called, I would be ready with an answer that protected both my home and my dignity. I just hoped I would have the strength to follow through with it. December the 20th arrived with the kind of bitter, biting cold that makes your bones ache. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup for dinner, when the telephone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the room's warmth like a blast of winter wind through an open door. Claire's name appeared on the caller ID. My hand hesitated over the receiver, Eleanor's warnings echoing in my memory. 5 days had passed since Claire's brutal dismissal of my help. 5 days of complete silence that had, surprisingly, brought me a sense of peace. On the fourth ring, I answered. Mom. Claire's voice sounded different. It was softer, almost uncertain. I'm so glad you picked up. I said nothing, waiting. Look, I owe you an apology. A really big one. She paused, and I could hear faint background sounds David moving around, in what sounded like their kitchen. The distant, happy voices of children. I was completely out of line the other day. Stress makes people say terrible things, but that's no excuse. Still, I remained silent. Something about her words felt rehearsed, too carefully chosen and delivered. Mom, are you there? I'm here. I've been thinking about what you said, about taking things slower, about finding other solutions. And maybe you're right. Maybe I was being too demanding. Demanding. That was certainly one word for it. The thing is, Claire continued, her voice warming with what sounded like genuine emotion, Christmas is in 4 days. David's been cooking all week. And the kids, they've been asking about Grandma Margaret. They want to show you their school projects. They want to tell you all about their Christmas lists. Through the phone, I heard a child's voice, Leo, maybe calling out something about presents. They were just normal family sounds, and they tugged at the parts of my heart I had been trying so desperately to protect. I know I hurt you, Claire said quietly. I know I said things that were cruel and unfair. But Mom, it's Christmas. Come to dinner. Let's just be a family again. The invitation hung in the air between us, shimmering with both hope and suspicion. A part of me, the grandmother part, the part that remembered Claire as a sweet, loving child, wanted to accept immediately. But Eleanor's voice whispered warnings in my ear about manipulation, about people who only show kindness when they want something from you. I don't know, Claire. Please. Her voice cracked slightly, convincingly. The kids have been asking why Grandma can't come. What am I supposed to tell them? That adults sometimes say stupid things they don't mean? The guilt was immediate and sharp. Maya and Leo didn't deserve to suffer because their mother and I couldn't get along. They were innocent in all of this, just children who wanted their grandmother at Christmas dinner. Have you told David about your financial situation? There was a pause. Some of it. He knows things are tight. Not the whole truth then, but perhaps that was Claire's choice to make. Mom, I promise. There will be no talk about money. No pressure about anything. Just a family dinner. Just Christmas. The kids have presents for you. Little handmade things from school. Maya made you a clay mug in her art class. A handmade mug. The thought of my granddaughter carefully shaping clay with her small hands, thinking of me, nearly broke my resolve completely. David's making his famous prime rib, Claire continued, her voice full of warmth. Remember how much you loved it last year? He's been planning the menu for weeks. I could picture it all so vividly. The warm, inviting kitchen, the sound of children's laughter, the comfortable chaos of a family gathering. It had been my favorite tradition since Robert died. The one day each year when the house didn't feel so empty, when it felt truly alive again. I won't take no for an answer, Claire said, but her tone was playful now, like the one she used to use when she was a little girl, asking for a later bedtime or extra allowance. The kids would never forgive me if Grandma missed Christmas. Behind her voice, I could hear David call something about setting the table. I heard one of the children ask if Grandma was coming. Normal family sounds from what seemed like normal, loving family people. Maybe I was being too suspicious. Maybe the stress really had made Claire say things she didn't mean. Maybe Christmas dinner could be the bridge that helped us find our way back to each other. What time? I heard myself ask. 4 o'clock. And Mom, thank you. This means everything to all of us. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, watching the steam rise from my forgotten soup. Something still felt wrong about Claire's sudden change of heart, but the overwhelming prospect of seeing Maya and Leo outweighed my caution. 4 days until Christmas dinner. 4 days to decide whether I was making a terrible, irreversible mistake. December the 2020 dawned crisp and bright. The winter sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows like a fragile promise. For the first time in days, I woke up without that familiar, heavy knot of dread in my stomach. Claire's apology had felt genuine, and the prospect of seeing Maya and Leo filled me with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since Robert died. While making my morning coffee, I found myself humming one of his favorite Christmas carols. The melody felt rusty in my throat, but it felt right, somehow. I pulled out my kitchen calendar and circled December 24th with a bright red pen, then stood back to admire it, feeling like a child marking the final countdown to Christmas morning. The toy store downtown was buzzing with the chaotic energy of last-minute shoppers. I wandered the aisles carefully, studying age recommendations and educational value, just the way Robert had always taught me. For Leo, I selected a chemistry set designed for young scientists. He had always been so curious about how things worked. Maya got a model airplane kit, something we could build together if she visited again. At the checkout counter, the young saleswoman smiled warmly. Lucky grandchildren. I hope so, I said, meaning it more than she could possibly know. That evening, Eleanor appeared at my kitchen door without calling first. Her face carried the kind of deep concern usually reserved for doctors' visits. You're making a mistake? She said without any preamble, settling into her usual chair. Nice to see you too, Eleanor. I'm serious, Margaret. Something doesn't smell right about Claire's sudden change of heart. I poured her a cup of coffee, stirring my own thoughtfully. People can change. Stress makes us say things we don't mean. Stress reveals who we really are, Eleanor countered, leaning forward with her elbows on my kitchen table. Think about the timing. She calls you pathetic, hangs up on you, ignores you for 5 days, and then suddenly, out of the blue, she remembers she loves you? Maybe she talked to David. Maybe he made her realize how cruel she had been. Or maybe she realized that insulting you wasn't getting her what she wanted. The word stung, because a small, cynical part of me had wondered the exact same thing. But the alternative, believing my own daughter was irredeemably selfish, hurt too much to even consider. The children have been asking about me, I said, my voice softer. Claire told me so. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. I know you miss them, Margaret, but you have to remember, Manipulative people will use whatever leverage works, even innocent children. After Eleanor left, I spent the evening in my study, looking through the photo albums again. I lingered on pictures of Claire's childhood, on birthday parties where she had seemed genuinely happy to share her cake with her friends, on Christmas mornings where her face had lit up with pure joy at seeing the gifts we had sacrificed so much to buy for her. That sweet, happy little girl had to still exist somewhere inside the angry, desperate woman who had called my life savings pathetic. On December 23rd, I tackled Robert's apple pie recipe. His precise, neat handwriting covered the yellowed index card in blue ink. Measurements, timing notes, temperature reminders accumulated over decades of loving practice. My hands shook slightly as I measured the flour, remembering how he had gently guided my fingers the very first time I had tried to help him bake. The kitchen soon filled with the warm, comforting scents of cinnamon and nutmeg, transforming the house into something that felt vibrant and alive again. For 3 wonderful hours, I existed in a bubble of memory, a world where Robert might walk through the door at any moment, complaining good-naturedly about my messy technique, while being secretly pleased that I was trying. When the pie emerged from the oven, golden and perfect, I nearly wept with a mixture of grief and pride. That evening, I wrapped the children's presents at the kitchen table with the same methodical care that Robert had always shown. Sharp, crisp corners, precisely measured ribbon, gift tags written in my neatest handwriting. Maya and Leo deserved that extra attention to detail. They deserved to feel special. My phone rang while I was tying the final bow. "How are the preparations going, Mom?" Claire sounded genuinely interested. "Good. I made your father's apple pie." "Oh, the kids will love that. Don't want to ruin Christmas dinner." "You're not ruining anything," Claire assured me, her tone perfectly balanced between concern and reassurance. "These things happen. Take all the time you need." The walk to the kitchen seemed to stretch on for an impossibly long time. I had to use the wall for support, my vision swimming as the familiar Christmas sounds continued behind me, the children's voices, the clink of silverware against plates, Claire explaining to Maya and Leo that sometimes older people just needed to rest for a moment. Each step required intense concentration. My breathing had become shallow and labored, as if the very air in the hallway had grown thick and heavy. The walls seemed to press in on me, the kitchen doorway wavering in my vision like a mirage. Behind me, I heard David's voice, barely above a whisper. "Should we?" "She'll be fine," Claire interrupted him smoothly. "She just needs a moment to collect herself." But I wasn't fine. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with my body. My heart was racing while my limbs grew heavy and numb. My mouth had a strange metallic taste, something foreign and alarming. The comfortable warmth of the family dinner had transformed into something cold and terrifying. I finally reached the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame to steady myself. The room beyond looked different somehow. The shadows seemed deeper, the surfaces more distant. Everything familiar had suddenly become threatening. The kitchen felt like stepping into a different world. Cool teal beneath my feet, harsh overhead lighting that made me squint after the dining room's gentle candlelight. I leaned heavily against the counter, gripping the cold granite edge as another powerful wave of nausea rolled through me. Something was seriously wrong. This wasn't excitement or wine or rich food. My body was betraying me in ways that felt completely foreign and terrifying. I turned toward the sink, desperate for cold water, when a slight movement by the kitchen table caught my eye. A small glass vial lay on its side, right next to Claire's car keys. A clear liquid was still visible in the bottom. My vision blurred as I tried to focus on it, but the shape was unmistakable. A medicine bottle, empty. The room tilted dangerously. I reached out blindly for support, and my hand knocked against a large mixing bowl on the counter. The ceramic shattered against the floor, the pieces scattering across the tiles like my own scattered, terrified thoughts. "Mom?" Claire's voice called from the dining room. "Is everything okay in there?" I stared at the vial, my mind working sluggishly through the horrifying implications. The empty medicine bottle, Claire's keys, the toast with the wine, the careful timing of it all. "Fine," I called back, my voice barely recognizable as my own. Just clumsy. But I wasn't fine. My daughter had poisoned me. The thought should have felt insane, impossible, but it settled into my consciousness with a horrible, undeniable clarity. Claire's sudden apology, her insistence on Christmas dinner, the toast to family, David's nervous energy, the way Claire had watched me drink my wine. I fumbled in my purse for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen swam in and out of focus as I tried to dial 911. My fingers wouldn't cooperate, hitting the wrong numbers, sliding uselessly off the smooth glass surface. Need some help with that? Claire's voice came from directly behind me. I spun around, nearly falling as a fresh wave of vertigo swept through me. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, no longer wearing the mask of the concerned daughter. Her expression was calm, calculating, almost curious as she watched me struggle. You did this." The words came out slurred, thick in my mouth. "You poisoned me." Claire stepped into the kitchen, closing the door quietly behind her. "Smart woman. Even while you're dying, you still figure things out. Why?" I backed away until I was pressed against the counter, the phone still clutched uselessly in my trembling hand. "Because you're selfish," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Because you'd rather die alone in that ridiculous house than help your own family. Because you chose your memories over your son's future." The coldness in her voice was worse than the poison that was coursing through my system. This wasn't stress or desperation speaking. This was cold, calculated, premeditated murder. The children will inherit everything once you're gone. And as their mother, I'll control the estate. They'll never want for anything ever again. I tried to press 911 on my phone again, but Claire moved faster than my weakened reflexes could manage. She plucked the device from my hands, sliding it across the counter, far out of my reach. "That won't be necessary. You're having a heart attack, brought on by the excitement of Christmas dinner. Very sad, but also very believable for a woman your age." David knows." The words felt thick as paste in my mouth. "David will say whatever I tell him to say. He's very good at following directions when our children's welfare is at stake." My legs gave out completely. I slid down the cabinet doors until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, my back pressed against the wood that felt like my only anchor to reality. The kitchen spun slowly around me, with Claire standing in the center like the calm eye of a hurricane. "This didn't have to happen, you know," she said conversationally. "You could have just sold the house voluntarily. You could have helped your family when we needed it. Instead, you chose to be stubborn. I worked 40 years for that house." My voice was barely a whisper now. "And now it's mine," she said with a chilling finality. "Along with your savings, your pension, everything. Funny how death simplifies property law." The vial on the table came into sharper focus as my vision narrowed to a tunnel. Something clear, odorless, tasteless. Something that would perfectly mimic a heart attack in an elderly woman. What did you give me?" Claire glanced at her watch. "Does it really matter? You'll be unconscious in about 10 minutes, dead in 30. The coroner will find an old woman who pushed herself a little too hard during an emotional family evening." 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to either save myself or stop Claire from destroying other lives. My phone lay 8 feet away, across a kitchen floor that might as well have been 8 miles long. "Maya and Leo," I gasped. "They love me. They'll get over it. Children are resilient. Besides, they'll be too busy enjoying their inheritance to mourn for very long." The casual, unfeeling cruelty of it broke something inside me that had nothing to do with the poison. My daughter had become a monster. No, worse than a stranger. A stranger might have felt some guilt, some hesitation. Claire felt nothing but satisfaction at her own cleverness. But she had made one critical mistake. She was talking instead of leaving. Her pride in her perfect plan was keeping her here, gloating, when she should have been back in the dining room establishing her alibi. And I still had about 6 minutes of consciousness left. The distant wail of sirens cut through the winter night, like a blade through silk. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, watching through the kitchen window as flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet suburban street in the stark colors of emergency. "They're here," I whispered to the dispatcher. "The police are outside." "Stay on the line, ma'am," the calm voice responded. The officers will want to speak with you directly. Heavy footsteps thundered up Claire's front walkway. Sharp, authoritative knocks echoed through the house, followed by firm voices calling Claire's name. From the dining room came the sudden sound of chairs scraping against the hardwood floor, the children's confused questions, and David's sharp intake of breath. "Police! Open the door!" Claire's voice carried from the front hall, bewildered and growing increasingly panicked. "Officers? What's this all about? It's Christmas Eve. My family is in the middle of dinner." I heard the front door open, followed by the sound of multiple sets of heavy boots entering the house. I heard professional voices requesting identification, asking about the household members, and demanding to speak with Margaret Harper immediately. "My mother's in the kitchen," Claire said, her tone shifting toward suspicion. "Is she all right? Has something happened?" The kitchen door swung open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by paramedics carrying their medical equipment. The first officer, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, approached me carefully. "Mrs. Harper? I'm Officer Martinez. We understand you may have been poisoned." With a trembling hand, I held up the small glass vial I'd managed to secure. "Rat poison. Arsenic. Based. I found it hidden among the spice jars after drinking the wine that made me sick." Officer Martinez took the bottle with gloved hands, studying the label through an evidence bag. Her partner began photographing the kitchen, meticulously documenting the spice rack and the wine glasses still sitting on the counter. "The person who poisoned you, ma'am, is he still in the house?" "My daughter, Claire. She's in the dining room with her family." The words felt surreal leaving my mouth. My daughter, the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle, the woman who had just tried to murder me for her inheritance money. From the dining room came Claire's voice, rising in pitch as the terrible understanding dawned on her. "Mom? What are you telling them? What's happening?" Officer Martinez spoke calmly into her radio. "Need backup officers in the dining room. Suspect is present with potential hostages." "The children are innocent," I said quickly. "Her husband, David, he knew about the plan but was threatened into compliance. The kids know nothing." The paramedics began checking my vital signs, asking a battery of questions about my symptoms and the timing. A blood pressure cuff, a pulse oximeter, questions about nausea and dizziness. Their efficient, calm professionalism was profoundly reassuring. I was going to survive this. The kitchen door burst open again. Claire stood framed in the doorway, her face cycling rapidly through confusion, realization, and finally, a cold, unbridled fury. "You called the police on me? On Christmas Eve? In front of my own children?" 2 officers flanked her immediately, their hands resting on their service weapons. Claire's eyes fixed on the evidence bag containing the poison bottle, and her expression changed completely. The mask of the concerned daughter vanished, replaced by something calculating and dangerous. "Claire Harper, you're under arrest for attempted murder." Officer Martinez's voice was steady, professional. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is insane!" Claire's voice cracked with desperation. "I didn't poison anyone. She's confused, she's sick, she's making things up." But her eyes told a different story. The careful calculation was still there, weighing options, frantically searching for escape routes or explanations that might possibly work. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The handcuffs clicked into place with a sharp, metallic finality. Claire's face drained of all color as the full reality of the situation hit her. Her perfect plan had failed completely. Not only was I alive, but I had found the very evidence that would send her to prison. From the dining room came the heartbreaking sound of children crying. David's voice, trying to comfort them through his own ragged sobs. Maya calling for her mommy. Leo asking why the police were being mean to everyone. "The children," I said to Officer Martinez, "they shouldn't have to see this. Social services is on their way, ma'am. We'll make sure they're protected." Claire was led through the kitchen toward the front door, her head down, her shoulders slumped in utter defeat. As she passed the chair where I was sitting, she looked up one final time. "I hope you're satisfied," she said quietly, her voice laced with venom. "You've destroyed your own family." "No, Claire," I said. my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. You did that. The moment you decided that money was worth more than love. The paramedics helped me to my feet, supporting my weight, as we moved toward the waiting ambulance outside. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering on their lawns despite the cold, drawn out by the flashing emergency lights and the police activity. Christmas Eve in suburban Cleveland had become a crime scene. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a final glimpse of David holding both children, all three of them crying as a social worker approached them with gentle words and official-looking papers. The family Claire had claimed to be protecting was now completely shattered, utterly destroyed by her own actions. The ambulance doors closed, cutting off the terrible sight of flashing lights and broken dreams. February brought the kind of crisp Michigan morning that made everything feel possible again. I stood in my kitchen, making coffee the same way Robert had taught me 40 years ago, watching Eleanor navigate my icy driveway with her usual careful determination. The past 2 months had transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Claire's trial had lasted only 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming, her plan too obvious, her motive too clear. 15 years for attempted murder, with no possibility of parole for the first decade. Morning, survivor, Eleanor said, stamping the snow off her boots at my back door. How are you feeling? Grateful. The word came more easily now than it had in January, when the sheer weight of grief and betrayal had made even simple breathing feel like a monumental effort. Coffee's fresh. We had developed new routines since my release from the hospital. Eleanor's daily visits, shared meals, and quiet conversations about everything except for Claire's current location in a state prison. Some wounds simply needed time to heal properly. The doorbell rang at precisely 9:00 a.m. David stood on my front porch with Maya and Leo, their weekend bags packed for another stay with their grandmother. The divorce proceedings had been swift. No one wanted to remain married to an attempted murderer, but David's financial situation remained precarious. "Mrs. Harper," he said, his voice still carrying the heavy burden of shame, even 3 months later. "Thank you again for this. I know you don't have to." "They're my grandchildren," I interrupted gently. "This is their home too." Maya and Leo rushed past their father, completely familiar now with the weekend routine. Homework at the kitchen table, afternoon projects in the garage, evening stories by the fireplace. They were just normal grandparent activities, but they felt revolutionary after everything we had all survived. "Did you finish the airplane, Grandma?" Maya asked, already heading toward the workbench where our models sat in various stages of completion. "I was waiting for you to attach the wings. Can't have a proper first flight without the chief engineer present." While the children settled in, David and I reviewed the legal paperwork that had become a part of our new reality. The educational trust for Maya and Leo was now fully funded. College tuition, graduate school if they chose it, money for books and living expenses. Claire's attempt to steal their future had, in a strange twist of fate, secured it completely. "The charity distributions are going well," I told him, showing him the bank statements that detailed the monthly payments to veterans organizations, the local hospital, and community programs that helped families in crisis. Robert would have approved. "What about Claire?" David asked quietly. "Do you ever think about visiting her?" I considered the question for a long moment, watching Leo carefully align the airplane wings, his small face serious with concentration. "I think about the little girl she used to be. I mourn that child. But the man who tried to poison me for money, that person is a stranger to me." Eleanor nodded approvingly from her chair by the window. "Forgiveness doesn't require stupidity. The children ask about their mother sometimes," David continued, his voice heavy. "I don't know what to tell them. Tell them she made very bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences," I said firmly but gently. "Tell them that those choices do not define them or limit their futures. And you tell them that their grandfather loves them more than anything in this world." Later that afternoon, Eleanor and I worked in Robert's garden while the children played in the backyard snow. Spring was still weeks away, but we were preparing the beds for new plantings, clearing away the dead growth to make room for whatever would grow next. "You know," I said, resting against my shovel, "Claire was right about one thing. I was living in the past, keeping this house like a shrine to Robert. Eleanor looked up from the rose bush she was carefully pruning. And now? Now, it's a home again. It's full of children's laughter and family dinners and people who choose to be here because they love each other, not because they want something. Through the kitchen window, I could see Maya and Leo at the table, working on their homework with the same focused intensity I remembered from Claire's childhood. But unlike their mother, they would grow up understanding the profound difference between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and financial obligation. "Will you change your will again?" Eleanor asked. "I'll leave them the house, eventually, when they're old enough to understand what it truly represents. Not money or property, but the choice to build something lasting, something worth protecting." That evening, after David had collected the children and Eleanor had returned to her own house, I sat in Robert's favorite chair by the living room window. The neighborhood was quiet, settled into its comfortable Sunday evening routines. Normal families in normal houses, probably dealing with normal problems that didn't involve poison or attempted murder. My phone rang. It was Eleanor, checking in before bedtime, as had become her habit. "Any regrets about not selling the house?" when Claire asked. I looked around the room where Robert and I had celebrated 40 Christmases, where Claire had opened her presents as a child, and where Maya and Leo now felt safe and loved. "None whatsoever," I said. "This house has good bones. It survived one person trying to destroy it from the inside. It'll outlast whatever comes next." After we hung up, I made one final cup of coffee and stepped out onto the back porch. The winter air was sharp in my lungs, and the stars were bright and clear through the bare tree branches. Somewhere in a prison cell 2 hours away, Claire was learning that some consequences last much longer than others. But here, in the home she had tried so desperately to steal, life continued. Children would grow up safely. Money would be used to help people instead of corrupting them. And love would be freely given, rather than strategically withheld. Justice, I had discovered, wasn't just about punishment. It was about protection. It was about making sure that the good things in life survived, while the toxic things were contained where they could no longer spread. Robert would have understood completely. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.